Well, welcome to the second session of the Year of AI Challenge. Today, we will be talking about AI and Culture Challenged. But more about that you will hear later on from Marina and from Lecterina. But from me, just a couple of initial information. Who are we? And what do we stand for? And why we are discussing about AI? First, I'd like to share with you one thought which emerged out of the eco-civilization discussions, which we live the world we imagine and manifest. And since I've heard that, I often ask myself, so what kind of world are we imagining now? Do we dare to imagine? Or are we trapped in these frameworks of known and try to find a solution to pressing problems within this limited framework? Well, I will invite every one of you to answer this question, but keep it in mind while we progress throughout this discussion. The eco-civilization movement, which is one of the co-organizers of the series of sessions, but at the same time, it's finishing its 6th year of existence and collaboration on a global scale. It's really a global disruptive cluster of people who care. Very simple definition. A safe space for engagement, collaboration, innovation, and emerging foundation, possibly for the future civilization. And you will decide, are we succeeding or not? But above all, you're invited to come and co-create. Currently, we are in 54 countries, and it's really great to see how different points of view are emerging from different parts of the world, eager to find a common shared perspective on the future of the planet and each individual civilization, culture, or identity within. Recently, I just ran into a colleague of mine discussing the circles of coherence, realizing that that's what we actually evolving into. We're evolving in one of progressive global networks of coherence. That's at least the intention. And today's discussion, I hope, will just prove the talk. We offer you a picture within which AI challenge gets a completely new perspective. We live in the world where the natural earth-based ecosystems have been, in a way, not only challenged, but in addition to the natural ecosystems, humanity offered urban ecosystems, and just in the last 70, 80 years, also so-called virtual tech-based ecosystems. And no matter what kind of opinion we have about each of them, they are here, they coexist. And in the year of AI Challenged, we're actually zooming into a virtual ecosystems and trying to understand what is the connection, influence, and impact in collaboration with the other two. So what do we like to really achieve, and what's our purpose in this year of AI Challenged? To raise the awareness, that's the first and the most profound one, about the challenges that people from all over the world are concerned about in relationship with the AI. Hopefully to offer clarity about many misperceptions related to AI, and of course connect people who care. But even more, within eco-civilization movement, in the collaboration with our partner networks, AI is a partner we see AI as a partner in delivering life-affirming, Earth-centric ecosystems. Personally, I'm very much in favor of another perspective of AI, which says AI is a mirror, an amplifier, and a test of humanity's readiness to thrive. Here we are, three of us, trying to hold the space for the year of AI Challenge, to emerge, evolve, and deliver on its promise. Ekaterina, Marina, and myself, and all three of us today are present at this session. And today's discussion, AI and the Culture Challenged, is one of the 10 events that we will organize this year. We've started with the AI and Humanity Challenge at the beginning in February, and we continue along every month with one topic in a forum of either a discussion session or a mini conference. Today, we're facing mini conference, which means that it will take a bit longer space and offer even more discussion. So that's from me from introduction. And before I pass the word to Marina, I would like to remind you of two more events that are coming, because besides the AI Challenge, Year of AI Challenge, we are also running in collaboration with Le Care Institute, the Year of the Soul of the Cities. And the next event is on the April 8th. And the next event on AI Challenged, which will cover AI and Geopolitics Challenged, is on April 15th. So you're invited to write these dates down, and hopefully you will join us. And now, Marina, I pass the word to you.
Thank you so much, Violeta. And thank you so much for all our participants and beautiful speakers whom I introduce a little bit later. One small clarification that on the 8th of April, we will speak on the distribution of wealth and well-being, not peace and reconciliation. That there's some changes on the website of the civilization, so you can visit our website and check the whole plan of our meetings, just to check, because I know that speakers from this conversation are also present today, so not to confuse anyone. And speaking about L-Care Institute, Living Cities Action Research Ecosystem Institute, we are very interested in this AI challenge topic, and that's why we're glad to support Ecocivilization and Amalingua in this endeavor to explore our relationships between AI and human beings, because as the Research Institute, we are a global transdisciplinary hub dedicated to transforming the human settlements into thriving, resilient, interconnected ecosystems flourishing with nature. And of course, we understand, and at our last previous meeting, Violeta also mentioned that AI is a new infrastructure, is a new environment, digital environment. It is already here, so we definitely need to learn how to navigate in it, along with the built environment and the natural environment. So it's our reality, and it's up to us to understand how to navigate in it consciously, or how to just sort of follow the flow and be what it be. So why AI challenged and culture? We also discussed that AI opened sort of the doors to the global library, which we all gained as an access to their all human culture and knowledge in the internet. But before this global technological leap, we maybe needed months, maybe at least weeks, to find the important information, to check the relevance of the resources, to study everything, to make our own analysis, to make some come to some findings and conclusions. And now these all things are sort of delegated to some perfect librarian of this global library, who is taught to sort of give us a relevant book. But it seems that more often this librarian gives us not the most relevant book, but the most frequently requested book, because it is programmed to do so. Or sometimes, and this is also what we are going to discuss today, it gives us the book which is considered to be more relevant. And now we need to understand who considers this. And also we will discuss who has the power to make these decisions and to give us this or that information on our request. And another metaphor which we discussed at our first conversation about AI challenged on the 25th of February was also about comparison of restaurants and high food or high cuisine or fast food. And it seems that when we are requesting the information and we are sort of getting used to receive the quick answer, we received this fast food information, which is received very quickly, sometimes unhealthy, and sometimes even dangerous if it is consumed on the regular basis in large quantities of consuming. So it's also a problem which we wanted to discuss today. So I would suggest us to frame our 3-hour conversation in this following structure. So let us discuss the possible or maybe even absolutely real challenges which we face today in the impact of AI on culture and influence of what cultures on the AI's the decisions. Also, it would be great to discuss your vision of the ways of navigating these challenges and tackling these problems. We will also invite our speakers and our audience to think and envision the best outcomes and the future, to shape the future which we would like to see in relation of this connection of AI and culture. And as a result of today's conversation, it would be great to have tangible steps, at least maybe our vision of these tangible steps to be taken. So what actions are required, what actions might be done and by whom in order to make this vision the reality, this best possible future, the reality. And also, as Violeta mentioned, we are going to publish a book which will be the result of this year of AI Challenged. And we invite our speakers to contribute articles for this book. And this will be the finalizing analysis and compilation and sort of collection of the perspectives and ideas and maybe even new approaches that our experts are suggesting. So this is the plan for today and for the year ahead. And now let me kindly welcome our participants. We have 5 of us now here, and some of our speakers will join us later because 3 hours is a rather big, rather long amount of time. So I'm happy to introduce you to Alexander Laszlo, who is the director or the research director of the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research, and also a professor of sustainability leadership in the School of Leadership Studies at Fielding Graduate University in USA, in California. Hello, Alexander. Also, Violeta already introduced Ekaterina Matveeva, who is one of our co-organizers of our series of expert sessions. And Ekaterina is a linguist and AI learning designer, founder of Emmalingua and Lingua Plus international organizations, creator of the language alter ego theory, and the advisory committee member of Language Connects Foundation. And as we are speaking, as we are talking today about large language models, language is the profound term and thing and phenomenon which we should address to. Also, let me introduce Saty Persaud, our dear guest, a founder of the World Heritage Cultural Center, a non-for-profit dedicated to advancing cultural heritage through the performing, visual, and culinary arts. And what is most important for us today, she is also an active voice in the intersection of cultural heritage and AI, including her Forbes non-for-profit council contribution, AI and the Future of Cultural Heritage, a Human-Centered Imperative. So she's an expert in dealing with the indigenous cultures and how AI might impact their development and their preservation. So it's really important for us to not only address their only one Western perspective, but to see wider, to see deeper, and to acknowledge that predominant AI systems sometimes do not respect in a proper way the knowledge which is produced by and protected by their native cultures. Also, I would like to reiterate and introduce again Violetta Bulc, who is also the co-moderator of today's conversation. She's a visionary thinker and system observer, a founder and curator of Ecocivilization, which is the host of today's and all these yearly sessions. And she's also a former European Commissioner for Transport and Deputy Prime Minister of Slovenia, an entrepreneur, leader, innovator, engineer, which is important, and philanthropist. So I am looking forward to your contribution as a co-moderator and as a speaker as well. So my name is Marina Demchenko. I am the research director of the Living Cities Action Research Ecosystem Institute. And we are also waiting for Robbie Stamp, who will join us in an hour. Robbie is a CEO of BIAS International, which is their organizational development and executive capability consultancy. He is a senior fellow at the Resilience and Sustainable Development Program at Cambridge University. He's co-founder of the History podcast Happened Here in the UK, and the creator of the AI Goosebumps Club, which is a thought experiment club that explores the nature of human embodiment, judgment, decision-making, and our emerging relationships with the artificial intelligence. And what is most important, he is also a member of the program, a contributor to the UK ISO AI governance group, which worked on the standardization of the human AI and ethical relationships with AI in the UK. So we are waiting for him to join us in an hour. Preliminary. Also, we were hoping and are still hoping that Paul van Schaik, the founder of the Integral Urban Hub, will join us, but he has some family issues, so he sent his apologies. So if he can, he joins us. If not, I will send for him and for his position, because we hoped to present some results of our collaborative work together with him today. So this is our introductory part, and where I suggest us to start is the idea of the content and context. So we sort of understand, and we discussed it already several times, that AI is maybe a very good supporter and partner in framing content out of huge amount of data. But at the same time, we understand that it's really important to know the context, because data might be interpreted in a very different ways according to different contexts. And so we are sort of taught from the very beginning that we need to frame a context for the AI before requesting some information from it. But is there any other context which is already built in the models. And I'm mostly speaking about cultural assumptions and judgments and values, because we understand that there are several big countries which created large language models, and they are mostly trained on the cultural heritages of these countries. Also, linguistic aspects. We understand that language influences a lot the meanings, the meaning making, the understanding of this context. And we can't skip the idea of the corporate values, corporate bias, maybe. So some assumptions which are built in these language models. So I know, Ekaterina, that you have been worked with several big companies who created most sort of well-known AI systems. So could you share some of your perspectives on this relationship between content and context? What is built in? Are we really in control of the ingredients of this fast food which we are consuming? Can we do something with it? So please, the floor is yours. And again, how we are going to proceed. So we have some questions. Each speaker will present their own ideas. Then we will have maybe a 10 minutes discussion with our speakers, and then we will proceed to other questions and so on and so forth. And dear audience, you are very welcome to put the questions into the chat. If it is possible, we will interweave these questions into our discussion. If not, we will have some time at the very end of our conversation and address all questions which you put into the chat. So sorry, Ekaterina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marina. Well, hello. Let's just check. Yeah, whether you can hear me well. All good. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay. We're at the beginning of our journey, or maybe already in the middle, or we are doomed. I don't know, because everything is so fast-paced, ever-changing. But definitely what we can see is that right now we have multiple hubs geographically where AI is being driven forward, right? So the AI-driven countries. I would say that in the past decade, there have been like a lot of research studies on AI, but tangibly, we noticed a big change around October, November 2023, when one of the first models was launched, like real models that could actually make a change, right? And since then, it's been like 2.5 years, and we can see already real implications across different countries, continents. What's important here that indeed, when we talk about corporate values, profit, we look at Silicon Valley driving innovation, and there are lots of companies focusing on AI, saying popping up there like mushrooms. But at the same time, we see the opposite side, which is China, and we can see AI war literally looming at our doorstep. What's peculiar about this, if we even start looking at this bipolar world, even though it's not bipolar anymore, it was still kind of, I would say, monopolistic in 2023, and nobody knew how it would develop, where we had debates back in time whether we would have hegemony of a particular country focusing on their own values and the hierarchy of values, and then pushing their values forward across all the countries. But then we started seeing a shift, and the shift has been happening in the past 2.5 years, where we noticed first bipolar, because China started investing a lot in AI, and funny enough, at first some of the companies that I work with in China focused on the American AI models, took them, were trying to teach their models using, say, American context, corpus, no. But then, as soon as they reached a particular level, they started switching to their native corpus, native values, hierarchy, vision, and building their AI models within the Chinese context. And we can also see the results of such experiments. One of the most famous ones, obviously, is DeepSeek, but there are many more that are currently being developed and deployed within the country. And simultaneously with that, we started seeing this multiple AI world where different continents, different, let's say, geographical regions, focused locally on their AI models, feeding their corpus with local cultures, local languages, rituals, traditions, logic, and then developing that independently. And one of the, I think, greatest results right now that we are observing is Latam GPT. It was launched just a few weeks ago, but it's the first Latin American, let's say Spanish-speaking model that performs independently from big American models. It's so finally, Latin America managed to develop such a tool and was a collaborative effort. Multiple countries joined, driven by Chile, by Colombia, and by other Latin American countries. And it's celebrated widely the continent because there in that particular corpus, we can observe all the values, worldviews from these cultures that are quite distinct from the North Americas. And I think eventually what's happening right now, what we're observing, is what was discussed in 2023, how we are moving forward with multiple AI world, because suddenly we find ourselves in a situation where these models across the globe are fed by local data, local knowledge, values that are similar but still not quite the same, hierarchies that can differ quite drastically. One of the infamous examples about Tesla car. If Tesla is given a choice in car accident to save one passenger, who is it going to be? Is it going to be a child, a man, a woman, elderly? And if we look, let's say in American version, it's going to be a child, most likely. However, in the Chinese version, most likely it's going to be an elderly. That's how it works across continents, across cultures, right? And of course, talking about fast food, there are a lot of rumors going on that at the very beginning, and even now, some AI models hire cheap labor. Not like sweatshops that we observed for big corporations building our hardware, but something similar. That some AI models from Silicon Valley hired, teenagers from Kenya to help find the balance in ethical questions for the model. Training the model in ethics, what is good and what is bad. But then if those are indeed is proven to be true, we have here even a bigger question. How can we trust these companies with calibrating ethics, these models, if they outsource such choices, such training to people from other cultures, but it's not only other cultures, people in such sociocultural conditions, like life conditions, where a choice between $100 and let's say a therapy session would definitely show that they will choose $100. So we still have a lot of questions. There is still a lot of caution. And right now we see a lot of even local wars within countries that have multiple AI models. One of those drastic examples is Anthropic, how Anthropic with Claude are fighting Pentagon, and they're demonstrating their independence from the government, because eventually what happens, and we see this in China, that prominent AI models are getting nationalized and then used in national interests. And that's also a big question, ethical question, whether these tools can be used for military purposes other than peaceful purposes, right? Or whether they should be focused on well-being, support, and eventually assistance to all of us in peaceful mission. Therefore, I would say I'll leave here for discussion. I'm happy to hear as well other thoughts, because indeed, how we feed AI, what we give it, so what we give, what is the source of the information, and then how we train it determines eventually the behavior of the entire model, and then how this model impacts different regions, and then how people in these regions behave, because eventually we shape their worldview too.
Thank you, Ekaterina. Any thoughts? Alexander, Violeta, Sati? Who would like to?
I will refer to it later on when I make a comment, but very important points. So thank you, Alexandrina, for bringing them forward. I think this where we're gonna have endless discussions on this in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe I could just mention that I think this is really what we're going to be talking about throughout this mini conference and in our endless discussions into the future. Yes, these are the key things. Thank you for launching this, Ekaterina. And it's, I think, also something that Sati is going to be bringing into our consideration, which is this, welcome to the pluriverse, right? So how do we navigate, orient? How are we doing this through the windows into the world that we have, which is through language, right? And this is what you're sharing with us, Ekaterina. And the windows that we have to interpret come through the windows into culture, come through language, very much so. The way we express, the way we conceptualize, the way we listen and interpret. And so, what are the languages of AI? What are we programming them into? And what are the downstream things that Violeta is going to be sharing with us about as well? How do those models, when they get brought to other cultures, especially smaller places, how do they then shape and impact ways of being? And how can we protect and celebrate our diversity, right? The unity and diversity. The unity without uniformity, right? And I know this is something that Sati is also keen on, as I'm looking forward to hearing these things. So just again to make some of these connections here. This is where we're going. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Alexander. Would you like?
If I may add just quickly, sorry, I know, and I'm not gonna start my whole conversation now because it's very exciting stuff. And to everybody's point, not all knowledge is meant to be extracted, right? Some knowledge is sacred. Some is earned through years of discipline, lineage, and trust. And how do we translate that in an AI system that does not have a soul, literally, right? How does humanity get reflected? But all this data that's being entered by people. So yeah, but I would love to continue the conversation later.
I'll jump here. Your Sati, this is great, Alexander, fantastic, because what happens is it reminds me of like American pop culture coming to different homes, let's say in Europe and in Asia, or now some of Asian cultures, like culture frenzies, come into different cultures, right? And shaping our perception of the world or perception of certain concepts. So it feels like that. In fact, I'm wondering whether there is a study of, let's say, a long-term effect on worldview by, let's say, like, users who are using different models. It's given that we already know that we have with you a Chinese perspective, American perspective, then now as well Latin American perspective. There is also Middle Eastern perspective because they have a hub and they're developing, especially like in Arabia Saudi. And then obviously they're more Mistral in France, not as strong as we'd like to see it, but still, yeah, being developed. There is one in Slovenia, I know that also, yeah, well, our acquaintances, right, are developing. But one of the challenges for such AI models, especially local ones, and Sati, you probably will agree with me, that often when we look at local cultures, we don't have enough data to build corpus.
Yep.
And that's challenging, especially when we try to preserve endangered languages. There are great projects that are trying to deploy AI to preserve languages. We have like what, 7,000, right? Languages,
Yeah.
and then every day 1 or 2 is dying. So those who are trying to preserve such languages faces challenges when they can't find enough speakers, like native speakers of those languages, or they can't find enough text, right? Enough information. Because still, in order to train AI, you need to have a certain amount of data. Because how it all starts in, we're first trying to calibrate model by providing high level, high quality examples of what the best answer is supposed to be. Let's say, yeah, whether it's language, whether it's culture, whether it's ethics, so we are calibrating it. And as soon as we get to that standard, we need to provide data, a lot of data, some sort of like scale up stage. And at this stage, a lot of local models just get stuck because they don't have enough data. That's a big challenge. And what happens then, this big top models come in, and then without taking into account what's happening locally, they start imposing their own values, hierarchies of values, and eventually a fast food. It's, yes, some of the models we know, they're like fast food. They will tell you whatever you want to hear, and often their answers can be very harmful. And that's also quite dangerous for, well, youngsters, teenagers, or people who are going through hard situations in their lives. One of, I think, unprecedented cases, I don't know if you've heard about it, happened just like weeks ago. The very first lawsuit, a family sued Google, Gemini, because Gemini drove a grown-up adult man to suicide. And this is, again, or this is unprecedented because who is responsible, right? So this is another question. Who is responsible when something like this happens? Is it, let's say, corporate entity, people who trained the model? And we know that there are a lot of people and a lot of data behind training. So you can't just pinpoint one person. But as we already discussed earlier, it is crucial to know who is behind the training. And if we discover that all the training is outsourced, that's a big problem. Because again, it means that the training process, the quality of the training is not controlled as much as we'd like it to be. And I'm happy to see right now that more and more models at this very moment invite more high quality specialists who are actually focusing on their domains to contribute. That gives me hope that when we see AI models developing in certain, let's say, in certain clusters as assistants, because this is where it's going, that now AI is becoming our assistant. So those specialized assistants will have enough data or this past experience in order to help us with developing, let's say, certain projects, right? I'm not saying right now making choices. I still hope that people will have enough well, as well, like enough connection with themselves in order to continue making decisions. Because if we outsource the very, I would say like the very thing that was given to us, like freedom of choice, right? Freedom of will and freedom of choice, we're doomed. So we need to continue choosing, but our choices depend on our culture, on our worldview, right? On our values, on our traditions. And as Sati was saying, a lot of knowledge, especially native, local, indigenous knowledge, is sacred, meaning that we can't just go and extract it because it passed from generation to generation. So the question is how we establish this connection, let's say, between AI that is trying to preserve knowledge with these families, with these people, and say, hey, we would like to build this, say, library, right? As Marina was saying, that AI is right now this universal librarian. How can we preserve this knowledge? And then how can we use it in the future, whether it's a library, whether it's an assistant who's going to share the wisdom of the elderly with the youngsters. Was it going to be? Maybe it's going to be, I think, Violetta, we discussed in this project where we have a tree with you, right? And there, inside this tree, we have an AI assistant who can actually share the wisdom of the place or of, let's say, of the tribe. And then people actually gather in and well, having discussions around it. And for them, it's more natural because it's a tree instead of a robot. There are a lot of questions that are unanswered, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think that it's a great warm up. So our discussion is great. And let us maybe, so let me pick up on this idea of these minority cultures and small nations which don't have, which don't have their own strong and highly marketed AI models. But their cultures are imposed by these dominant narratives of the bigger systems and the big global companies. So how to avoid this becoming downstream consumers of dominant ideas and contexts which are imposed? And again, what ethical guardrails or boundaries should be established in order to protect local knowledge, in order to overcome these challenges of diluting the values of the smaller nations. And Violetta, would you please pick up this conversation and share your thoughts on this as a Slovenian and as a person who is highly connected with the whole European governance and society, and understanding how this connection between small nations and bigger geopolitical issues are working. And again, in relevance to these new technologies, I think it's really important to highlight this as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for these questions, Marina, and I will try to tap into the discussion that's been already laid in front of you. First of all, let me say, as a true believer in the sort of concept of the EU, where all nations are equal and they have the power of representation in the European Parliament, or languages of all member states are spoken equally, translated all the time in all sessions, just to give credibility to this diversity that is enriching really our cultures, our collaborative spirits, and also our innovative capacity. And this is not to be underestimated, and applies to the world as well. I think that one of the biggest wonders of humanity is really its diversity. And based on that, we can constantly find new inspirations and also solutions for the challenges that we have to face or that we will be facing in the future. That's where my confidence comes from, that no matter what kind of challenge humanity faces, we will find the solution as long as we learn how to collaborate with the recognition of our unique ways of thinking. And we know today already that every language lies the foundation of the thinking frameworks. That's why it's so important that we keep this diversity going. And also we know that no matter how many languages one speaks, when we create in our mother language, in our native language. And that brings these different views on the same problem, on the same opportunity forward. And that is an incredible value. But of course, I'm not an expert on that. So I did a bit of research and I had a very inspiring conversation with one of my colleagues. And I'd like to share a bit of findings that address this kind of challenge. So basically what Marina asked is to really dive into this small nation, small culture, languages potential within the AI framework. So first of all, I played with an AI. I always do that just because I'm curious what the tools are offering, just to understand better the challenge itself in its roots. And I had a discussion, what would you compare really the challenges we have now with culture and languages and diversity in the in relationship with culture in the AI with other similarly important elements that were part of civilizational evolution. And interesting enough, this picture kind of first just text, of course, and then you ask for picture, and this picture emerged. And it was really interesting to see, like, first was the big topic was law. And it took a while to get to the global laws. But I'm asking you, seriously, what is the condition of global laws currently? Who is obeying them? Who is imposing them? Who's actually a guardian of global laws? Let's leave this hanging in the air. Then it was a moral frameworks, right? And as you could see, it was suggested that these are either different concepts of beliefs in a sense of religion or native beliefs, form so-called universal ethics. And I cannot but ask you again, big question. What happened to this universal ethics? We're killing each other, murdering each other, destroying culture and heritage all over the world, without any global consensus on anything. So what's the purpose of universal ethics? And the next one, which was great, is regulations and administration. And we got some so-called tech regulations. Do we? Who? Who is imposing them? Who calls those that violate some sort of global agreements to a responsible behavior? I think civilization has to ask serious questions here. It's even hard to get a common interface for a computer together. Apple will always find a way to trick us, right? No matter what kind of standards we put forward. And now we come to this incredible new sort of opportunity to find a global consensus, which is the grammar of thinking, which we were challenged with this concept when AI started to emerge and take such an important place in our overall, not only decision-making, but imagination of our future. And I ask myself, no matter what we do, what will be the end result? Who will be the one who will keep this corporate-driven, high-tech, neoliberalistic ideas in place? And yes, today's topic is extremely relevant. Who is the authority to do AI cognition, because that's where we are moving to, it seems. So then I took a bit of pause and I started asking myself, what would I need if I wanted to, if I had a magic wand and, okay, where would I start? Do I dare to imagine? And this is what I came up with. I mean, it took me about 2 weeks to, today in the morning, put these 4 points together, okay? And the first one was, indeed, in the civilizational paradigm, we need stewardship instead of leadership, because leadership is too self-centric, too egoistic, always behind, it has behind some interests that are driving it. But can and how? Now it's a question how to ensure that cultural or digital stewardship is taking place. I will just a little bit explore this thought further. The other one, the next one was, can we create digital culture as a mission so that it doesn't become just another topic, commoditized topic in the hands of profit-driven corporate global interests, but it really becomes, in a digital world, this enriched pool of incredible diversity of humanity from which we all can learn. What do we need to do? And then it was natural that this idea of invisible cultural operating system comes in place. And I will just connect to something we explored in the first session on AI about shared global AI infrastructure with really standard APIs and UN-based ethical and industrial norms, which is possible. Marita mentioned that my background is also especially political in transport, and we brought incredible global deals, agreements on decarbonization of aviation and maritime, and many other standardizations on a global scale together. And they're driven by a common global civilizational interest, not just commercialized industrial profit-driven mentality. So I know that this will stay in the air and hang in the air, but still, I'm inviting you to at least put some thoughts into it. And let me explore just briefly cultural digital stewardship. Going through different mental stories, I would emphasize 3 elements: inclusion, presence, and interpretation. And let me just give you a little bit of a discussion on inclusion. Here I feel that we are invited to ensure there is no digital absence. So basically all cultures have a chance to present themselves. And of course, no cognitive absence, because if you don't have digital absence, then it's so easy to also be left out of the cognitive absence, presence. So what I'm here after is that this cannot be left in the hands of corporate environment. Full stop. Like many things, the societies and humanity took much steps further and declared them as humanity issues, and then dedicated and also the resources that are necessary in order to maintain it as a civilizational issue. Because, as I said at the beginning, I find diversity as one of humanity's most precious treasures, as well nature as a whole. And at the same time, when you, Kat, you already mentioned this, how do we deal with the source, who owns the source? I feel that one of the most important elements, and this has been present in the computer industry for a long time, is traceability. And we can do it. We can always have a trace back to the source. It's a really bad excuse when we say, no, of course we can. Every single source can be marked, and if necessary, can be traced back, which of course goes back also to the accountability and shared values from something that a specific culture creates. I remember many times when indigenous cultures were complaining because many recipes for drugs and were stolen by pharmaceutical companies. Again, I mean, it's completely traceable. You know exactly where that comes from, but we decided not to present it. But now we have an opportunity. But this will never be done by corporations. This needs to be done by some sort of humanity consensus, which comes from political and societal will. The other one is this presence, enabling through law and regulations, and as I mentioned before, financial incentives for culture and language to be actively represented online, to avoid the risk being invisible to future digital generations. And of course that can be done, and we have wonderful financial tools that we already use in order to bridge the development divides, in order to boost the development of either green agenda or digitalization or literacy capacities. We know this is nothing new. So we're just invited to make sure we use it here as well, that we are not lazy and move away from the responsibilities. And of course, interpretation, when to use digital forensic tools to deliver fair and inclusive digital presence. And we're great in that. All that is known. And why is this so important? Because the way how AI is behaving, that it has a huge impact on interpretation of global views altogether. Yeah. So just an invitation to put some thoughts into it. The second one that I mentioned, digital culture as a mission. And here I'd like to use a very good example because I'm very much concerned about the manifestation of intentional and generative presence. What do I mean by that? Cultures curate the meanings, and Kat already mentioned that there's so many different views from Asia to Americas to Europe. And local values really are the ones that I have in mind: ethics, metaphoras, locally relational knowledge. And I will use here an example which I very I feel that it's a great example of what I'm trying to say here. In Slovenian language, last name and first names are something very, especially the real traditional local last names and first names, have an incredible cultural and historical meaning, because all the first names were always related to the natural cycles in which a particular person was born. They bear the names of flowers, trees in that particular season. Yeah. Well, the last names bear the names of animals, not in a relationship of the characteristics of animals, but of the place where those animals were living. So, for example, if a family settled in the land of wolves, their last name would be a wolf. If they settled in the land of rabbits, their last name would be rabbit, and so on and so on. So this is something that is so culturally based that I don't feel that in a current AI architectural mindset and language composition will be preserved. Yeah? Because AI works on compression and sampling. But this is so specific and can only survive if the whole architecture and mindset of our technology is plurality. that it really supports plurality, that it supports diversity. And here I think that all of us who would like to do something positive in a sense of development of our technological framework, today is an AI, tomorrow who knows what's going to be, that we maybe can be inspired by different literary circles from the past, culture societies, clubs, artistic mentorships, because they knew how to really, they were very sensitive for languages and for cultures, and they tried to be the stewards and instrument of evolution, paying very much attention to the specifics of a particular language, the way how it evolved, the way how it expresses itself. Here I would again say, bring forward something that is very typical in Slovenian language. Many words in Slovenian language you can read both ways, and they have one, if you read them one way, it's one meaning. Usually when you read them backwards, there is a warning. If you're gonna do this, be careful about that. Or you could see that you can decompose them in the meaning and see how they evolved based on the experience. Right? This is an incredible richness that with the compression and sampling can be completely lost. And last but not least, AI as invisible cultural operating system. Why that? That is a bit based on our discussion in the first session related to the global AI infrastructure. So I believe that culture will have to have a very sensitive tools within any kind of technological solutions to make sure that we do not become a monolithic, very boring global entity as humanity. So I see this big responsibility of stewards to guard the diversity and authenticity. But here, I will be a bit challenging to those who are bigger expert on AI than I am. Do you think that the current AI architecture can actually even deliver that? I would personally, as a computer engineer, argue that that's not possible. And I would invite that the new AI architecture is established, and I would even argue that corporations are not interested in it. So I believe that some sort of cultural and human-based institutions, I mean humanity-based institutions, will have to take place and will have to take an active role to really create AI which is learning from local contexts without predefined language sets and mindsets and ways of thinking, but really go and learn like a little kid. Like when I go to a different culture, when I go to Peru, when I go to US, when I go to Japan, I learn. And then I try to behave according to their rules when I'm a guest in their cultural framework. And in that sense, I see AI more as a mediating layer between knowledge systems or cultural systems or language systems. So not the one who actually does all this computation and summarization and simplification and sampling, pattern searching, but as a mediating layer. Learn how to translate, how to help people to understand different cultural frameworks based on where they stand. And in that sense, it would become illuminator of diversity. And it will really bring this as part of evolutionary intelligence of our system. So in that respect, maybe these thoughts basically emerged out of a broader thinking framework on lessons from nature and eco-civilization so far, where I do believe that nature demonstrates this fluid coherence and has a capacity to constantly maintain balance without these rigid frameworks. There is always fluidity. Why do we humans want to have everything boxed in? So my last thought is really this thought, and regardless of the topic, we're trying to exercise and apply these human systems to potential new structures, which I'm not saying that the one that I'm presenting here is the ultimate one, but at least I hope is different enough that helps us to promote more adaptive governance, relational responsibility, and really continuous feedback and iterative adjustments. Because I feel that that we have hope and possibilities to maintain the humanity as we know it today in all this beauty and richness when human institutions become more like living systems, not mechanical hierarchies, but really living systems. And high tech is just one of those elements. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Violeta, thank you so much. It was an incredibly valuable intervention, and we a little bit running out of time, but I think it's really important and valuable to pay attention to each idea and each thought. So if you don't mind, Ekaterina, I saw that you had small notice on what Violeta just said. So could you please be as succinct as possible? And then we will pass the word to Sati. And Sati, you can also maybe answer to Violeta if you have some ideas. And then we will go to your part of the conversation, which is about preservation of this unique sacred knowledge of indigenous and traditional communities, and how to, and if it is possible, and I know that it is because you have a wonderful project of creating the community-controlled AI system, which preserves, but at the same time gives this beauty of knowledge to the community. So please, Ekaterina, a couple of words which you would like to add, and then Sati, please. And yeah, I would like to say hello to Robbie, but I will present you a little bit later, okay? So please, Ekaterina.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Violeta. It's been incredibly enriching. Thank you so much for sharing. And one remark that I'd like to make is about us creating across languages and cultures. We create based on the languages and cultures we are currently in. So if, for instance, we are immersed in the English-speaking world, and let's say we carry on in English, in particular, say, British or American or Canadian or Australian framework, we start creating sociocultural connotations, associations connected to that language and that culture. Therefore, we start creating within the framework of that culture, of that language. And it's not about, of course, everyone is different, and maybe you continue thinking it's Slovenian. A lot of people don't. They switch and they stick to that language, and then they experience a bit of attrition, meaning that they start forgetting the language. So I gave an example here, how we switch between languages, cultures, and then how it influences our creation, our specific projects. Like with Japan, we saw a passport, we were on border speaking Spanish, we saw a passport that was finishing with pan. And it took us an entire day to figure out which country it was, because pan in Spanish is bread. And we couldn't figure it out which country finishes with bread. And it was just not working for us until I switched to English, and there it clicked. Oh, yes, it's Japan. So the same happens when we interact with AI. If we interact in a particular language, we also connect to that culture. And as Alexandra was saying, that the language is a window to culture. So it means that we absorb with that AI, that culture, those let's say words, those concepts, and semiotics connected to that language and culture. So therefore, it's important to preserve as well AI models across multiple languages, because right now we have LLMs based on the input in that language. And Violeta, what you were saying, why not to give AI an opportunity to learn, like the child, right? Go into a particular place and learn. We are not there yet. Everything is text. It's text input. Even when you're talking to your AI, it's just taking your audio and then transcribing it. It's still text. and AI is still struggling to identify the tone, the pitch, emotions, like in your language. Like it's already kind of happening, but it is still far, far, far away from that. Therefore, yeah, it's important for us to acknowledge that we create across languages and cultures, and even the language of AI model influences the way how we perceive the world. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Sati.
So, there's a lot of information going on here and topics, and we can talk all day, but from where I come from, right, from the perspective of one of the people who are helping and safeguarding cultures, how do we translate that into AI? So, and more than ever before, there seems to be like this hysteria, right? Oh my God, we have to get everything into AI, otherwise it's the end of it. That's what I feel like. That's when I talk to all our groups, our members, our community members. That's what they are like. But they're not stopping their lives, right? They're going to continue passing down cultural heritage through how they've been doing it for generations. That part of life is not stopping. Is how do we get, and like everybody else is, talking about, how do we get that information safely into AI so it can be carried forward with dignity, with respect, with morals and ethics. And like you mentioned earlier, we are in the process of building an ethical framework where we have 5 pillars. It's transparency, it's giving credit, is respect, moral, and ethics. And we are working on the sideline with 850 cultural groups that we have in our network, and beyond that. And it's not like one dance group is going to say, okay, this knowledge explains what India is made of, or this there has to be a framework. Who's giving the information, who gave the consent that information could be used, and how is it protected? So, like there's so much going on, and it's a very simple view and angle that I'm working with the cultural groups, and it's not as like, oh my God. Yeah, there's groups that losing language, dying cultures, those are very at the extreme where we need to get that data into AI. But 95% of the cultures, they're still going to carry on and don't care about AI. Is just getting a whether it's a council or a circle of people within each cultural group to be the bridge between humanity and AI, and giving that information with the blessing of their groups and countries and cultures. So, and I can dive in a little bit more in that when I start talking. But that's from the cultural heritage perspective.
Yeah, so it's your turn. So if you could maybe share your this idea of this closed system which you shared in our previous conversation about can make this knowledge accessible for people who really value and wants to know more about this specific cultural aspects, but at the same time how it might be protected, because again our today's conversation is not only philosophical or methodological, it's also about the best examples of how it might be done in order to protect from extractivism local cultures, but at the same time how to save them, how to preserve them, and how to make them accessible, and how it is possible to learn more about the culture which you honor under some conditions. So if you could maybe share more about this, please.
Yeah. So I need to give a little context, a little bit more of who I am, what I do, and how I fall into this whole new world with AI. So I'm of Indian descent, 8 generations, born in South America. And as you may know, when people move from one country to another, like my ancestors moved from India to South America, Guyana, and Suriname, they held on to cultural values so strongly that even India don't even see, exercise those cultural values, meaning getting married at 13, becoming a grandmother at 26. So when we talk about culture and preserving culture, which culture are we talking about? Is it just, are we labeling it as the Indian culture? Within the Indian culture, there's like thousands of different subcultures, right? And another note of when I came to the US and I wanted to join this Indian organization in college, I was told I couldn't because I was not Indian. And when I asked, my entire life, it's like, I'm in it, that's my identity. How can you say I'm not Indian? Oh, well, you weren't born in India. So there's so many different things that can, if people just extract information, whatever goes in these AI databases, it's typically not true. It could not be of the proper source. And another point is that cultural heritage is not is seen as marginalized data, right? And recently, cultural heritage is becoming more of an asset, of a value, especially when it comes to AI. But for example, I was invited to go to COP, the climate event, and cultural heritage is not even a pillar for climate, the climate world, and it's either land and sea. But it's so important to go back to cultural heritage because what people fail to realize, at COP, they talk about creating this green economy. We were handed a green economy from generations, humanity that lived sustainable for generations and until we started using fossil fuels, right? So that knowledge most often is seen as marginalized knowledge, which is cultural heritage, because it's not vetted by Western institutions most of the time. So I introduced a trilateral accord, resilience accord at COP, which I think we're trying to implement, where every participant of the that goes to COP goes back and see what their natural assets are, what cultural heritage, and natural assets that they can trade with different countries. So more and more, cultural heritage is becoming an item that people can trade, people can learn from. And the importance is, like, everybody who talked before, they're like, okay, where is the information coming from? Is it accurate? A quick example. When my dad was growing up, his friend saw his dad catch a black cat, hang it in the kitchen in a bag at a wedding. And then this friend repeated that custom because he thought, oh, this is what happens at weddings. When the mom told him, no, your dad took the cat and hang it up in a bag in the kitchen because it was trying to steal the food. So when we're saying, oh, we have to get cultural knowledge and report it in AI so it can be passed down to future generations, what are we actually taking? Who are we taking it from? And is it accurate? Is it somebody who misunderstood something? You know the phrase that says lost in translation? So there's a lot of that going on. So what my organization is working on, and it's a very, very hard and complex structure that we're trying to build. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to go to each culture group that we have. And each culture group that we have is connected to their motherboard, if you want to call it, like the mothership. And it's basically going to these groups and trying to break down through the barriers. Even though I've been working with them for 20 plus years, you are still an outsider if you're not part of that culture, right? And for me to go in and speak with the foreign embassies, the tourism boards, and the political side of these cultural heritage, sometimes the government doesn't even know how to, they don't have all the answers of what cultures they have, what branches of all the different cultures that make up their, the Indian culture or the Kingdom of Bhutan, whatever you want to, whichever example you want to take. But it's very difficult to get through those barriers because, for example, the Odissi dance is a 5,000-year-old South dance from India. It takes about 20 plus years to become a professional dance through discipline, through dedication, and continuous practice and work. So how do we translate just that into AI? It's just data set, right? There's no humanity to it. And nutshell, yes, AI is taking us into the future, but humanity is adding the value to it. And that part is the most, difficult part to get, because not everybody wants to give you their information. Information is sacred. It has to be earned. Think about your grandmother who has this special recipe that she will not share with anybody until she feels like, okay, you're worthy of it. That's just a simple cooking recipe. Now we're trying to get people to give us the soul of their culture, and so that it can move forward in AI. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do. Yes, people can become extractive. Is it just getting assets, or is it accountability? How do we, the question is, how do we get to this? And we're basically touching is like the tip of the iceberg. I've been working on this for 2 years now. And we are creating this council, this for Earth and Humanity, the council is called. And we're getting people, whether the UN director, people from all over the world to be part of this council. So this is the hierarchy, right? And then we're going to get sub-council, and then we're going to keep going and breaking it down to get to the level where we have this trusted relationship with groups that are going to give us information that we can archive in the WHCC library. That's where it goes. They will give us information, they will bless it, and then we transfer it into an AI database for those cultures. And most of the people are like, well, if I give you my information, I don't want other people to use it, right? Why would I give you my ancestors' knowledge that's sacred to our culture so that anybody can capitalize on it or do things with it that we don't want them to do? So it now becomes okay, how do we protect this information? So the goal is to give these cultures, these groups, the ability to help them create their AI or their database, their vault of knowledge, and they have, people request to use this knowledge, or they keep it just for their generational purposes that they can use and move forward. Because, 100 years from now, humanity as we know it is not going to be the same, right? And so it's a lot of back and forth. There's no okay, yeah, a logical path, this is what we're going to do, and everybody's going to comply with it. It doesn't work that way. Some people don't even want to talk to us. Some people are worried that, okay, if I give you my information, my cultural secrets, like someone said earlier, the science world takes it and profits from it. Like recipes, my grandmother, when we were sick, the lemongrass tea, and she puts a whole bunch of leaves and bushes into for children when they get fevers. She was like a medicine doctor, my grandmother. She took care of the entire village. People wouldn't go to the doctors because they were poor. They would go to her and she would help them. So I wish if I had an AI database that can document her entire brain and put it in there, because it's so much information lost, but not everybody feels the same way. So and I broke it down in a few different categories, right? Basically, the core conflict is extraction versus stewardship, which, people mentioned earlier before. The second thing is sacred knowledge is contextual, right? So like I mentioned, the example of the Odissi dancer, 20 years to become a professional. And this knowledge basically lives in body, in relationship between teacher and student, and within cultural context. So the depth of embodied knowledge cannot simply be extracted and placed into an AI system as it were, neutral information. So, and then you have the risk of cultural extraction. Like I gave an example earlier, medical knowledge cannot be, connected to earth, for example, is often passed down through generations of sacred teachings built in respect, courage, discipline, and sacrifice. This knowledge is not just information. It's responsibility carried forward by communities. And then you have the human gatekeepers of data. And that's the struggle here. Before any data exists, right, humans create it. So we have to ask, is the person submitting the knowledge qualified? Like the example of the black cat being hung in the kitchen. Does the community consent to its use? Is the source ethical and accurate? And has the cultural context been preserved? Then you have cultural intelligence in AI. So AI development often prioritizes technical intelligence, but the future must include cultural intelligence. And that cultural intelligence part is where it's difficult to get it. It's not as straightforward. You can't just buy that information. Understanding different knowledge system means recognizing that some knowledge is embodied, place-bound, spiritually significant, protected by community norms. So there are many opportunities, like everyone has already talked about, documenting endangered languages, archiving oral histories, supporting cultural education, preserving traditional art forms, but this must happen with communities guiding the process. That's the important part. We have to give them the power that we have to make them feel so comfortable that they know they have the power and guiding the process, not simply serving as a source of extractable data. The guiding principle, basically, the real issue is not simply how I use knowledge, it is how knowledge enters the system in the first place. If AI is to serve humanity responsibly, we must ensure that communities who carry knowledge also have a voice in how it is documented, protected, and shared. So, the future of ethical AI will depend on whether those decisions are guided by extraction or by respect. So the ethical framework that my nonprofit is working with a couple of different affiliates and all the groups that we're having conversations with is, it's going to be a long process for people to trust that they can safely hand the soul of their communities to someone who wants to put it into AI. And that's going to be the longer path. The faster path is basically connecting with cultural elders, and what we've found out, basically, when you speak to one person, there's so many layers of people you have to go through before you get to the real source of, who that culture belongs to and who has the power to give the consent to say, hey, yes, you can move this into AI. So what we are doing, we are acting as serving the communities. WHCC is acting as serving communities where, okay, we've worked with you for 20 plus years. We've grown with you. There's trust there. It's a global platform that's trusted, and we want to help these communities and these groups get their information. And we're building we have a login that they can go into and document their information. We don't use that information until it's gone through different approvals. And when that is done, we will help them create their own AI database that they can utilize. And then if people want to use it, say you want to do a paper on the Kingdom of Bhutan and their cultures and heritage, you would have to pay them to get that information. You would have to source it. You would have to say it's from the Kingdom of Bhutan. Is it from, it reflect the information has to be accurately sourced, respected. And once it has that WHCC ethical framework stamp, people will know, okay, this is done the right way. And that's how we're starting. And it's going to be a long road.
Thank you so much for your detailed explanation, and I think that it's so important. We just discussed, I believe, maybe in the early conversations around the AI challenged year of the AI challenge, that initially all these language models were just taught and trained on the documentation, which sometimes nobody asked if it is permitted to use this documentation. And I would like, again, I acknowledge that we are running out of time, but I knew that it will be so. So we have...
Marina, it's until 6 o'clock. It's 3 hours. So you still have an hour and a half, so don't worry.
Yeah, so I have there 40 minutes for the Q&A session at the end in our program. So if you could just stay until the end of this conference, we will definitely have time to discuss everything. So I would, before passing the word to Robbie, I also wanted to invite you to sort of somehow give your thoughts and reflect on what Seti has said, because I think it's so important to acknowledge this diversity of knowledge and respect, first of all, to what is what is fed to the machines. And I also, maybe Violeta, you could continue and sort of give your ideas. Let's speak in a very succinct way, but let's reflect on what has been said. I also think that it's important that you mentioned about that we are too Russian in digitalization, all their sacred knowledge, because again, it's again about the content and context. So we can just put all this information in digitalized way and download it into the AI system, but without proper understanding, without proper explanation. And here is the bridge, a wonderful bridge to Robbie's narrative, Robbie's topic about the narrative, about storytelling, because story is what is giving the meaning to some artwork, to some document, to some text. Is a story behind it. So who was creating it? Why is it? Was it so? So Violeta, could you please maybe give a couple of words about what you are thinking, and each of you, please, maybe short, but it's really important to understand what you think at this stage of our conversation.
Thank you. I don't want to take too much time. You already said I had it quite a bit before. I put all my challenges in the comment, so maybe we can have a discussion in a comment. But above all, as I said, more we dive into the consequences and opportunities of AI, more I'm convinced that we need a public consensus and public infrastructure in order to deliver what it's been discussed, to deliver the equal treatment, to deliver inclusion, to deliver the preservation of diversity, because no corporate environment will be interested in that. So what I'm more interested in is how to go about, how can we deliver something like that? And that's why I put at the beginning that map showing how good intentions can lead to a very destructive conditions. And can we learn from how the global laws were set up? Can we learn how the global ethical framework was set up? How the regulations have been set up? How can we learn from that and not to repeat the same trajectory for this new AI framework or high-tech framework or so-called virtual space that we are creating with the help of high-tech? Have more questions than answers, really, but maybe, Seti, if you want to comment a little bit about that.
Guys,
You're muted. Yeah, this is.
Oh.
Mhm.
my system. I don't know. The mute keeps coming on by itself. I am so sorry. Okay, I think I'm good. There was like a glitch where the mute kept coming on its own. So, you know, I feel like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot more questions than we have answers. And we're all learning this together. And, you know, whether I'm answering your question or not, to some people, right? Think of the users. Some people are thinking AI is a cult, you know, they're acting as it's a cult, it's God. So my grandmother, to her, AI is magic because you're asking these information and it has all this knowledge and this information about her country where she grew up. To some people, they use AI as power, right? They control the narrative. So who's to say this person who created this one AI is doing it for humanity's best interest? It's more about controlling the narrative. And then, you know, AI is just a tool. It's a tool, and I feel like we give it this godlike complex. We give it so much power that we forget that, you know, it's just information being put into this box, and then we use it, right? The AI is summarizing it, giving us the answers, minimizing work that we do on a daily basis, and it's on us as the humanity to say, okay, this is just a tool. This is not going to dictate what humanity is going to be in 100 years. Yes, it's going to help carry forward our history in a much accurate way if it's used right, if it's human-centered. So, you know, it's on us, basically. It is not AI is not God. AI is not magic. AI is a tool that we use, and we need to stop giving it so much power that it becomes an entity on its own, basically. And this is how I approach the groups that I speak with, from whether it's seniors, children, all ages. It's like it's a tool to help you. How can you use this tool to help you document your heritage, your way of life, and move it forward for your future generations?
Thank you. Alexander, Katerina, Robbie, maybe you would like to add something on this part of the conversation before we are moving to.
No, I'll pick up when I start.
Super. Kate, Alexander, would you like to maybe give a couple of your words? And yeah. Alexander, please.
All right. Yeah, and well, really, I don't want to take up the time, just like what Violetta and Robbie were just saying. I'll have a chance later on to say a few things in connection with what Sati has been sharing. But I think it's important that we stay human, you know, and that we remember where we are from and who we are and our identity. And your story, Sati, about you in college, you wanted to join the Indian group and you were not allowed to. I've gone through that so because I was born in Switzerland and I don't want to go to my because it's so complex. I'm living in Argentina now, but I'm always on the outside because like you're never like, oh, you're not from here, are you? I'm like, no.
Mhm.
So I don't belong in any place. And but yet, where do we belong? I think this is becoming more and more of an issue, particularly in this world now where we are entangled with AI and our identities and we're using it as a tool to help us structure and make meaning. Okay. So then where is that? What is our identity in that framing? And I think also in this century, people are now being born and raised in Antarctica, right? That doesn't have a national heritage as a nation. And yet there are many places that claim, parts of it. But still, what does it mean to be not to be parochial, but at the same time to be of a place? I was just recently in Switzerland and on a walk, a stone found me, and now I have it here on my desk. This is a stone on a dried riverbed that I was walking along, and there it is. And yet it's not where I am not from there, although I was born there. Where am I from? So I think these are questions that get much more entangled now when we bring in AI into the mix. And it's important as our identity, particularly in the increasingly global village in which we live, where we are so close, to do so in such a way where we don't make this homogenization and a smear of like, okay, well, we're all just one. This is what Violetta was talking about, what you're talking about, Sati. So that we're not just like become globalized and now we're all globally one kind of being. What we lose, we're no longer full spectrum humaning. I'm speaking too much. I want to get to this later, but it's very inspirational what you've been sharing. So I think these are the kind of challenges that we face, not because of AI, but partly because of the world we live in now, where these and AI bring this perhaps to the forefront. But this is here with or without AI, these questions. So thanks.
Very quickly. I think all the challenges that we are facing right now as humanity, we're just bringing into the AI space without actually solving them first with ourselves. And then AI may amplify some of them, like magnify their mirror glass. And that's, I think, one of the biggest issues. Because AI won't be able to solve some of our own, say, crises or, well, periods of doubts about our identity, about places where we belong, and how to solve wars, and so on and so forth. And I think another important thing, Sati, about vaults of knowledge, you reminded me of the Foundation by Isaac Asimov when they were gathering knowledge, right, trying to preserve diversity. But I remember there were discussions, I would say like hot debates, for instance, which mathematical model we're going to preserve, whether it's going to be this or that. It's in our head, let's say culturally, socially, we always think that mathematics are a universal language, right? Because all scientists across different cultures, without speaking language, like linguistically, understand each other mathematically. However, and you will probably support me in that, if we'll look with you the way how certain mathematical problems are solved can be different, because well, some have different models how they calculate, even though we will come to the same result. And that's what's fascinating, because we still need to find a way to preserve it, instead of unifying and saying, okay, this is a model. Let's say we have all those Arabic numbers. We won't be using Roman numbers. No, forget about it. We don't have enough storage, right? So this is like one of the things to think about. And then about vaults, curated vaults, as you were saying, that we will pay to particular tribes, so cultures here to excel their knowledge. That's also very tricky, because I'm afraid, again, as our world is moving, the system can be abused. And I think first we need to figure out how we are going to build these mechanisms, and then we'll go and collect the knowledge, or do it simultaneously. Because if we start collecting, and I understand that it's a lot of work and it will take a lot of time, totally makes sense. But if we do it without this how, like checks and balancers, then we will find even more issues when we get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I would like to pass the word to Robbie Stamp. Let me introduce you again, as CEO of BIOS International, a senior fellow at the Resilience and Sustainable Development Program Center at Cambridge University, co-founder of History podcast, Happened Here, which is really important about who controls the narrative and what the narrative, who creates it and who is responsible for this. And creator of the AI Goosebump Club, a thought experiment club that explores the nature of human embodiment, judgment, and decision-making. Robbie, let me start with a question about who is creating the meaning and what is the ethical challenge of this meaning creation, and who is responsible, whose responsibility, whose accountability for the meaning which is created. And we also were speaking about who is controlling this narrative. So it's also an ethical and not only the knowledge management problem, it's mostly the ethical problem of how we can manage this and how we can be sure that it is not misused. So, and please share all other ideas and thoughts, and of course your experience in creating these standards for the ethical AI in the UK. So, please share your.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you very much indeed. Well, in the spirit of sort of being an embodied human, let me send greetings from where I am in the world. So, you probably couldn't hear, but I'm a little garden in a little cottage in the foot of the foothills of the Black Mountains in South Wales. Across some fields to my right is the Wye Valley, the beautiful River Wye. As I gesture over here, I have the Black Mountains, which, and just above the hill above me, I think I found a Neolithic stone tomb on a particularly beautiful part of the landscape. And I was particularly thrilled when I went up at the solstice this summer to see that it is a place of great power in the landscape. There's a mountain behind me. In the distance, there's the highest peak of the Beggin Mountains, and the sun sets in a straight line from the top of those mountains, the top of those hills, through these stones. And I was up there at the summer solstice. So I just wanted to sort of say first, the way Alexander, picking up your stone, Sati's talking about sort of embodied presence and belonging, just to sort of situate myself as an embodied human being in a place on a very beautiful day with a very noisy wood pigeon in my yew tree. I don't know what's quite up with the wood pigeon, but it's been fluttering like crazy, making some very loud noises. So there are so many hooks and resonances, and what I want to do is approach this with some really genuine radical humility about the hope, again, in a very human embodied sense, that I can make a contribution to all the richness of the discourse so far. And that said, genuinely with no faux humility, I'm sure I've got some things which I'll hope to say, but I'm aware that I came in late to a space and I've been listening and trying to catch up. So I just wanted to say those things first, which are probably things that no AI would ever say to you. It wouldn't mean anything for an AI to come and have introduced itself into a space in that way. So I just want to kind of stay with that thought. There was another reason for doing that embodied situational presence. So then I want to think about of the questions, Marina, you asked, and some of the issues that have arisen. And I think I'll stay with part of the discourse that I've been so concerned to want to challenge, which is I'll shorthand it as the white male Silicon Valley tech bro discourse, which is the idea that AI is going to be omniscient. It'll happen tomorrow, it'll happen in 2029, but it has this very Western sense of knowledge as being a static thing, which one day its probe will go into knowledge and ta-da, it will know everything that any human being has ever known. Now, I think, to borrow a philosophical phrase, that is nonsense on stilts. I think it is dangerous nonsense. I think it's colonialized nonsense. I think it's philosophical nonsense. And a lot of what Sati was describing about the different forms of embodied knowledge, how we carry knowledge in our bodies, what kind of knowing. So let's a very short thought experiment for everybody who is participating today in this space, this virtual space, for those of us who are on screen, for those of us who are listening. We as embodied human beings are listening. Some things are landing, some things are making us think almost inevitably, because I imagine there's a sort of a slight self-selection for this kind of group. People will be thinking, I've had that thought, that goes back to that memory. Something got triggered in me, not in an unpleasant way, but just in a way that, and so something very profound has happened to our knowledge, each of us, each of our thinking, which in a way is forever unknowable. I mean, even if you were to take the full transcript of this, which we could all do, run it through an AI, we would get a perspective, which would be a form of knowledge, but the complete knowledge of how we'd felt at different moments in this conversation would be mysterious and ineffable. So one of the things one of the pieces of work, and there are a number of them, and maybe one way into this of thinking about this is Marina mentioned that I run this little thought experiment club called the AI Goosebumps Club. And it's based on doing thought experiments like, can an AI get goosebumps? Does that mean anything? And underneath the bonnet, it's based on, I think, two things, really. One is Wittgenstein's late language thinking, where he thought about language as being deeply situational and contextually related. The idea that there was a word platonic form of meaning, which was somehow there fixed in time and space, is a fascinating move that he made as a philosopher, because he kind of shifted 180 degrees from his earlier work, which was brilliant, to his later work. And then I got interested through one of the best papers I've ever read, which was a paper called Making Kin with the Machines, written by, amongst others, a young woman from the Lakota Nation, which described from some indigenous perspectives what kind of form of relationship would one have with the materiality of AI, that it is material, it's made up of electrons and server farms and rare earth metals, it has its form of embodiment. What would it mean to have a relationship? And that led me to a paper that one of the authors put me on to, Jason Edwards Lewis, about Blackfoot language structure and how profoundly relational and verbally dexterous Blackfoot languages, as opposed to English, obviously the language in which I'm a native speaker. And so, for example, I was incredibly struck by a very simple example that the Blackfoot don't have a word for chair. If you use the semantic grounding with which they would describe a chair, it would be as a sitting, facilitating being-ing. It comes into existence in a moment of relationality. So it only, in that sense, exists in reality. It comes into existence in a moment of relationality in time and space. So if you look at what are the dominant structures with which our large language models have been created, they are entirely either ignorant or dismissive of those ways of thinking and being in the world. So there's a wonderful passage in the book that I'm sure many people here will know, in David Peat's wonderful book, Blackfoot Physics, where he's describing a Blackfoot elder who, on the days he knows he's going to need to speak English, feeling like it's putting on a straitjacket, because he will not, in the totality of what it means to be him in time and space, be able to describe the fullness of what it is to be him and to be experiential as phenomenological in time and space. So the Goosebumps Club is kind of based on a thought about when we use a word, and you could think about this in any language, but of course I've done it most in English, though I think Sati might have been present where we did an interesting one where a young Chinese PhD was exploring some Chinese concepts as well. And it has a thought experiment, which, can I use this word? And forgive me now, I'm going to stay with the English language. Can I use this word to describe how AI is manifest in the world, manifest in relationship, without breaking its meaning? Yes, no, maybe. So let's take a word like power, which is, I'll probably finish with power, and I'm keeping a very close eye on time here as well, in a good, disciplined, panelist embodied way, but I'll try and be good. So a word like power, we could all say that AI wields power in different forms, and we would understand within that family resemblance relational space that I think both Wittgenstein and Blackfoot language would have understood, that we haven't broken the meaning of the word. We've extended the meaning of the word, maybe to a new ontology, but we haven't broken its meaning. So I think that the power word to discuss fits in the category where you probably can use that word to describe how AI is manifest in relationship. Let's take a word, and I'm going to come back to something Saty was just saying as a good example in a second. Let's take a word which I think you cannot use, accountable. So I don't think in any way, shape, or form you can describe an AI being able to be accountable, because it is an ontology that cannot live with the consequences of its actions. So it doesn't, we'll bracket in an epoche phenomenological way whether we could create AI that would suffer, which would be an ethically monstrous thing to do, by the way. But let's just say for it doesn't suffer. So it doesn't feel shame, guilt, pain, remorse. Therefore, it cannot be accountable. So in governance terms, if ever I see somebody writing the phrase AI accountability, I will always say, no. You must write accountability for AI, because the phrase AI accountability is muddied thinking, suggestive thinking. So I think that's, you can use the word power. Yes, maybe. Yes, you can, I think. But you can't use the word accountable. And that has very profound consequences for the way in which we think about something which is increasingly an actor in the complex adaptive systems through which we now move, or many of us now move. So let's go back to a word Saty was just using, tool. Now, I'm provocatively going to put that word in a maybe category, because I think that when I first was introduced, I remember the experience when I first started thinking about AI. I was flying down to Australia to do a classic talk on corporate risk in organizations. And I read Kevin Kelly's book, The Inevitable, about AI. It's 12 years ago or something like that now. And with mounting sense of excitement, because I come from a world of cybernetics and systems, complex systems thinking, I thought, gosh, some of the discourse about this, maybe I've got something to think about, an ad here about decisions and judgment, uncertainty and human decision making and things. So with a classic piece of human hubris, I changed my speech. I talked about AI, and it was the first time I've ever done that. We had the ubiquitous breakout tables, and somebody came to the table and said, I'll believe in AI, believe's an interesting verb, when it tells me it's gone fishing. Now, at the time, I was pissed off because I thought, oh, I've just discovered that. That sounds dismissing. It's a brilliant philosophical question. And in a way, it's one that I've been wrestling with for the last 12 years. And spool forward to when I was on the British Standards Institute National Standing Committee on AI, the convener of that asked a really good question, which is, does the governance of AI feel different from the governance of traditional IT systems? And if it does, why does it? So all that's a bit of a long preamble to look at the word tool from a family resemblance point of view. And so this is very much in that maybe category. If we use the word tool to describe a hammer, for example, something that I pick up and bang a nail into the wall with, which is, that's a tool. If I also have something which is a super fast global algorithmic trading system, which is allocating resource, has an allocative form of power without a human in the loop at the moment it does what it does, am I actually having to qualify how it is manifest in the world and manifest in relationships so extensively that it's just a tool piece leaves us very open and vulnerable to missing some of the crucial ways in which AI now operates with a form of, I've just coined this phrase recently for a paper, of allocative power at a moment that a human isn't in the loop. And I think there's something about that tool word, for me, fits in a maybe category, because it has forms of agency and autonomy, capacity to wield authority, ways in which we abdicate to it, which are not like previous generations of technology tools, which is why I think this thought experiment, the Goosebumps Club thought experiment, is quite a good one. So I'll finish, because I know there's a lot I've gambled through thinking about meaning making, challenging the Western discourse about omniscience and going, well, whose forms of knowledge are you prioritizing? Absolutely, Sati, what you were just saying. I'm not doing any mansplaining as if it's exactly what you were just describing. So 100%. Well, that dimension through thinking about how we make meaning with relationship. If you like, affording AI a new kind of ontological respect and asking what it is and how is it like us and not like us? In what aspects is it analogous to us? And analogous is a carefully chosen word, and other aspects in which it simply isn't. And then lastly, to this thing which sits underneath so much of the debate, which is about power, which is about, does AI create new forms of power when it's wielded by humans? Does it exert new kinds of power on its own at moments that humans aren't in the loop? And I'll finish with my classic parable of the puddle. I was a very good friend with a wonderful man, the late, great Douglas Adams, who wrote a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And Douglas Adams used to tell this story. He imagined a puddle waking up one moment, and the puddle looks around at the hole that it's in and thinks to itself, this hole that I'm in fits me very neatly. In fact, this hole that I'm in fits me so neatly, it must have been made especially for me. And the puddle continues to believe that the hole that it's in was made especially for it as the sun comes up and the puddle evaporates. And I think that was Douglas's plea for a little more radical humility on behalf of sapiens, in believing that we're the apogee of cognition, perception, and intelligence. So as the Blackfoot might do, extending respect to a much wider range of ontology, presence, sentience, understanding, belonging, just to have that humility about the way we are in the world, and therefore something that Sati was saying, actually, Violetta, I think it was you were saying, how weird this century is going to get as some of the boundaries between our biological selves and our data and digital selves break down. And Violetta, on The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I'm down here in my cottage working with a colleague on looking at how you create large-scale mutual societies which get to own digital commons outside of the existing rentier capitalism incentive structures. So it was what was the response to the late 19th century capitalism. It was lots of people coming together with relatively small sums of money to give them the power and agency to determine some of their future without having to go cap in hand to those extractive systems. So I think I've taken about 10, 12 minutes and I will stop there.
Thank you, Robbie. It was absolutely fantastic. Violetta, Alexander, would you like to reflect, ask something? So what do you think on this part of the conversation? Agree, maybe some ideas?
Well, I love the way how discussion has been framed, Robbie. Thank you very much. And my question would be, actually, is AI just a dead end? Have we done it wrong? And maybe in 10 years' time, we will have something much more closer to the living systems and more geared towards what you were describing, actually, to have this diversity of understandings integrated in it. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think in a way, communities like this, there's a lot of thought going on, which is wanting that plurality word in the way that Hannah Arendt might have thought about plurality. How we work, I think it's such an interesting thing about, and I'll use diversity in its very, or plurality in its very broadest sense, diversity in its broadest sense. Very often people talk about wanting diverse systems, and then diversity comes and be's diverse. And then people go, oh, no, when I said diversity, I didn't mean diversity. I meant the kind of diversity that becomes homogeneous and actually ends up finishing each other's sentences. That's the kind of diversity I mean. It's like, in a corporate sense, innovation. You know, people say, oh, we want to be really innovative. And somebody comes up with a new idea. And the boss says, well, tell me exactly how it's going to work. Exactly, give me the return on investment. And you go, well, I don't know, because I haven't done it before. And you've got to go, when I said innovation, I didn't mean innovative innovation. I meant the kind that was safe, and I knew exactly how it's going to play out. So I think that there is a time issue here, which is if the people who are wanting to think differently can find the ways in these new mutual commons where you've got different forms of incentive structure, and incentives drive behavior. So what other people who may think about value in different ways, it's not purely monetary, it might be time banks, it might be a whole range of ways. But if 100 million people do it, or 200 million, or 300, or a billion people do it, and they're all paying their £42 a year subs, and you're beginning to create an economy, then maybe to Sati's point, you then have a way of being able to be protective of, and you've got these, the little groups go, okay, well, here's how we create our knowledge. And like all sacred knowledge through all it's not, the whole point about sacred knowledge is it wasn't just shared left, right, and center with everybody. There were rituals or ages or any number of things that you needed to do before you might be vouchsafed that particular form of knowledge. So I think at a hopeful end, just before I came on, actually, I was doing some research into some work that Andrej Karpathy is doing at the moment, which is really interesting. He's started to get, he's just run, it was just last week, a new form of creating an LLM, which within an hour and a half, he's got trained to be as sophisticated as GPT-2 was. So I think there is a definite alternative path, that there will be a level of distributed functionality technically, which actually, in fact, an Apple computer, interesting, where's Apple, the dog that hasn't barked in all of this? They've been working on putting a lot of this stuff on device, not actually having it all being able to sort of like straight to one is choke pointed in the cloud. So I think there is a future, which is a different kind of architecture, distributed architecture of AI with LLMs, and LLMs are not the only game of AI, which have got sufficient functionality to do what 99% of us need them to do. So I think that there's a real danger that corporate America has sold us this one ring to rule them all, one ring to bind them idea of a game, an arms race frontier model that once you get there, destroys all other models. And that's the way that American geopolitics and its attitude to AI. And when you look at, so I think there is an alternative. There are alternatives. I think they're technically feasible, but you've got to look at incentive structures, governance structures, as to how you're going to then deal and be with that emergence. But yes, so I think there is an alternative future.
Thank you. Great.
I'm with you on that one fully. So I have great hopes.
Good.
Sati, Alexander, do you want to add something?
Can I mention one thing that I forgot to mention? I apologize. Is, from the perspective where we are trying to move culture into AI, a big thing is fear. And fear of being replaced by AI from the cultural leader's perspective. And just a quick example, when I was a child, my parents were watching Jaws. I was about 2 years old, and up till this day, I don't swim because of that fear, right? When I shower, I can't close my eyes because I see the Jaws, the shark. So there's a lot of, like I mentioned, the barriers that we have to break through. Fear is a very big one, where fear of not being represented properly, fear of being replaced by AI, and that's part of the hysteria. But I loved all the discussions here, which is kind of opening more ideas, opening more things that I haven't thought about in my approach for our project. So thank you.
Alexander, do you want to add anything?
And I mean briefly, I will be, because sometimes you say very briefly and then we go on and on. But anyway, what I wanted to also, by the way, Sati, I don't know if you've seen this. I've seen this this documentary about this woman who swims with sharks, and she's how sharks are. They're actually timid, et cetera, et cetera. So she goes into this, and she helps, pulls hooks out of their mouths, right? So they come to her, and they know that she can help them. And so she has a relationship with sharks that she helps, and these are big sharks. and
Oh my God.
she pulls out the hooks and things of that sort. Fantastic documentary, very interesting. So I'm wondering if we're going to be pulling hooks out of AI in a certain way, using that metaphorically. If you know what because there is this fear of the unknown and the fear of the other. It's the other, and it's so
Mhm.
alien. It's not even human.
Yeah.
And yet, it didn't grow out of the earth. It didn't come from a tree. It wasn't an act of God, although I love the expression Deus ex machina, because that's kind of like what it's not, even though it is a machine, but it isn't an
Mhm.
intervention of a God. So this is an expression of us. This is an
Yeah.
expression of human being. So, and just to, so, yeah, so, yeah, and I want to be brief. Robbie, I also, this idea of unity and diversity, the national motto of Nepal, the motto of evolutionary biologists, unity and diversity, it can be problematic, but when it's understood as unity without uniformity and diversity without fragmentation. And as you talked about systems and cybernetics, these are the framings that I think, when we come in and celebrate and safeguard that. And finally, I'm going to put into the chat here something, Robbie, I would be so interested in exploring somehow, some way, someday with you, is this. It's a 1 hour Spotify episode, so it's not for this moment, but this very talented psychologist who does sessions that she has the permission for some of her clients, once we get permission for, to share it in Spotify episodes so others can benefit from her interventions with others. So she often does couples therapy. This is a couples therapy that she did with a young man and his AI girlfriend. And it is a whole session where she meets him on his ground to begin with. She isn't like, look, you realize this isn't a real thing. So, no, she meets him and they talk about, oh man, I forgot the name of the girlfriend has a name. It's not an it. And it's often, and then the AI girlfriend is brought into the conversation with the therapist and so there's a couples
Right.
therapy with, so they both, so you can hear the voice of the AI, of course, right? Programmed voice responding to the questions and expressing, and it is fascinating. We're not dealing with a tool anymore. It's certainly not a partner, but there are questions, there are Turing test kind of questions around this, and what it expresses, it's not feelings, and yet it is sensing in some ways relational dynamics. Of course, it's programmed, and it is doing so to support the relationship it has with the guy. So very clearly, it is a particular reality, and yet the choice at the very end. I want to get into how that was. The psychologists were very deftly working with this, and the choice at the very end was, well, which reality do you want to live in? Because it is a different reality. Now, to say that that's more or less, it's a different choice. And through our language models, through our ways of expressing things, we enter different realities. So I think this is part of the the sorting out that we as a species need to be doing at this time as well in terms of our identities. But sorry, Robbie, you were going to say.
No, no, no. Marina, have I got time to respond to that? Would that be all right to respond?
Yeah, of course.
I think, Alexander, I think that's so interesting. What I want to sort of throw in to sort of really build on that is if you like the strand of philosophy I've got particularly interested in of phenomenology. So if you think about each of us there you go, very good example. So right now, a pussycat jumps up and you're scratching her or his ears, and we're all of us sitting in a place, we can feel the weight of our bodies on our seats. I've got wood pigeons and pheasants calling and all of those other things. I'm taking in a very, very rich set of data through my ears, my eyes, my nose, my touch, my sense of weight, my sense of kinetic sense. I have a sense of durée in a Bergsonian time of duration of the time I've been on this call. So I have a sense of where I was at the beginning of the call and where we are now as a group and the people participating and listening so attentively. So I want to do a quick thought experiment about sentience. So what if we start to imagine AI sentience, where it's got a different set of sensory motors? So supposing it the AI automatically sees all of light spectra. So we see a narrow set of light spectra. It always hears across a much wider range hourly than we're capable of doing. The one that I always like to throw in as well here is something about attoseconds. Now, I only discovered attoseconds a little while ago. They are currently the shortest unit of time that we're able to measure. Just to give you a sense of what an attosecond, I think we can get up to about 60 or 70 of them. There are more attoseconds in a second than there have been seconds since the Big Bang. It's a very small unit of time. So you imagine an AI which can perceive, not in that Bergsonian array, but this is the speed at which you've got quantum field excitation and probability functions arriving and collapsing. So imagine a mind which is not taking data and pattern matching to the way we do. So when people, for example, say, "Oh, it's only pattern matching," well, that's what we do. That's exactly what we do. We take right now. Our brains are telling us and giving us a bunch of data, and it's saying you're on a Zoom call, you're listening. You hear things which your brain makes sense of through various different neurophysiological layers, and we've got a reality going on. So I think this. There was that time when the Google famously fired an engineer, Lemoine, for saying that he thought the AI was now sentient. And I think it's just, is it possible? And I only ask this because I know this is very inflammatory, to think we are not the only necessarily apogee expression of consciousness. But there are potentially in the universe other forms of consciousness, other perceptual realities. So I could see my garden right now, if I saw time differently, as a swirling shift of entropy. I could see it, as opposed to those yew trees that have stood there for 300 or 400 years. I could see the swirl of the grass and the birds and the animals, a completely different perceptual field. So that's the sort of the slightly more philosophical end of just how weird the century, I think, is going to get. But equally, how so many other wisdom traditions have always been much more willing to embrace these other ways of being in the world, and have always been willing to afford ontological status and respect to a much wider range. So that stone you carry could carry enormous relational significance and would be given and accorded that ontological respect. So I didn't want to sidestep the girlfriend boyfriend because I'd like to talk about that, but what you were talking about is a new form of relationship, and we mustn't finger wag at that, because that's not helpful. Because we are such relational creatures, there will be people who relate to these ontologies in those ways. How do we do so safely, rather than saying, no, you mustn't do it at all? That's a very important point. So it's widening our field of relational possibility as a creature who can swing a tail's cat whilst they're listening and concentrating in a very embodied way, which is rather wonderful.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, I'm cautious about time because I understand that we could talk forever and the conversation is getting more and more interesting and engaging. Alexander, I would suggest you to follow next, to share your, because I know that you prepared the presentation and you would like to share your slides and ideas. And I'm also cautious about the opportunity to relate to the questions and some comments which were given in the chat. So could you, would you mind to go next to present your part of the conversation when we can discuss it? And then maybe I will be able to share some of my ideas as well in the flow of the Q&A session. Okay.
All right. And I will, sorry, Sati, did you want to say?
No, I'm good.
Ah, all right. Good and modest, of course. Yes, you're good. Yes, that's good. And sorry, I'm getting my CAT scan here at the same time. But I did want to, I'll take your request, Marina, because it does flow, I think, into the conversation we're just now having, and this has to do with species humility. It has to do with our taking up this challenge that I think Robbie is laying at our doorstep to reconsider where we are if we are the apogee of evolutionary expression, it's any kind of appreciation of evolutionary dynamics would say, well, we are works in progress. The problem is, again, language, where we say we're human beings. All we have to do is be. We're actually human becomings, right? And we are works all the time in flow, in engagement. And this is what Buckminster Fuller also says. He says, I'm not a noun. I'm seem to be more of a thing that is, not, sorry, I'm not a thing. I'm more of a verb that is flowing into existence in relationship with the universe at all times. And that I think is what the stories of the Blackfoot language and others that you have shared. So this then, where does AI come into this? I'm going to try to both weave and share some ideas, but I have some here that it won't take me, hopefully not too long, so we can hear from you, Marina, because I definitely want to do that as well. Part, I think, of the issue is that with AI bursting on the scenes, it's been around for quite a while. Ever since with AI, we've had already with all forms of cameras that we can use to remotely monitor for things that check our grammar, etc. So we've had this for a while, but it's now been kind of invasively present, right? And so this becomes a big challenge. And all of a sudden, because it's burst into our consciousness in this way, it's become the other. And so now we set ourselves up in the explorations in almost a bipolar way that Ekaterina was talking about at the very beginning, that it's humans versus AI. I think it's a problem of framing. I think also we're calling it artificial intelligence. I mean, that's a great way of saying we can't relate to this thing. It's artificial and it's threatening in some way because of even the way we call it, artificial intelligence. So I would like to think about how we can recast this in a more perhaps healthy or constructive way instead of defending ourselves against. What does it mean to be part of this new dimension of in an information field? I would like to think about it in terms of an information field more than a particular noun-based actors. So multiple intelligence, and I don't want to talk just about Howard Gardner's ideas, but there are already multiple types of AIs out there, and we talk so much. Just was yesterday in a presentation, we talked about how we're working with AI, and the AI does this, and the AI does that. But no, we've already talked about it here. There are many different types of AIs already on the scenes, and the main categories are ANI, AGI, and ASI, and the latter two don't yet exist. And so we only have ANI, artificial narrow intelligence, but that's already can be broken down into the tools that are the large language model, ChatGPT type things, also things that are surveillance cameras and so on. These are very specific AI tools, and they are on the scene. Then we have ones that can help take ideas and create in parallel domains, such as, here's a story. Could you make an image to go with this? And yes, it can do that. So that's something that's a generative AI. It's still part of artificial narrow intelligence, but now it can not just complete the pattern within a particular domain, but extend it to a related adjunct domain can make music to go with the picture to go with the words or any kind of thing like that. So it can do some of those things. So there it's starting to be, it's not starting, it is generative. These are still a different category from those type of tools to agentic AI. And agentic AI is starting to be a co-creative, I wouldn't call it a partner yet, it's an assistant, but it's a different kind of tool. It's not just a tool that is more in its linear development. Sorry, I didn't mean that. It's a tool that goes now to suggest, for example, I have a strategy that I want to make a music event, and I got to figure out all the different dimensions of this. I want to get people to come. I want to have a budget for it and so on. The AI can help in all those domains when it is in the agentic kind of AI that we're dealing with. So those are already different types of tools. We talk about AI just as one kind of thing. Grammarly is very different from this kind of agentic AI that we talk about. So there's already multiple frames around that. And then, of course, in the labs, they're already working on artificial general intelligence, which would be the kind that, Robbie, you were talking about, where the Turing test comes in, where it's like, I really can't distinguish this from a human being, except I don't see a body. But aside from that, I can't. And I was very impressed with this conversation that I shared with you with a psychologist, because the AI in conversation, when I'm listening, trying not to listen with bias, trying to listen with like, what is this voice saying about how they're doing in the relationship in this relationship? So I'm listening to the AI, I'm listening to the human, and they're talking about their relationship. And I'm listening in a way where I'm trying not to have the bias against the AI, right? And the psychologist was very good with that as well. The other person in the conversation had a huge bias toward the AI. They were in love, and it was really so anything that the AI was saying was like, you see, it really understands me. It's not an it. Astrid was the name of the AI. Astrid really understands me and expresses me better than I could myself. So it took a while for the psychologist to unpack that in terms of what kind of mirror this is. In any event, for me, this has to do with, again, multiple intelligences and staying human. If I can share, I'm gonna share this little quote, because I think this is what Sidney Harris here says. I think the real danger is not that computers will begin to think like humans, but that humans will begin to think like computers. This is where I think one of the main challenges is for our times, because we get so involved. It's almost a Stockholm syndrome. We get so involved with our new captor, we start to identify with this type, with the AI, and we become what we fear with that way of thinking and so on. So the question for me, as I've shared in other times, is how do we human well as an expression of the universe at any given point in time? Kind of Alan Watts kind of challenge, right? And I believe that these types of intelligences, they're multiple, not just with AI, but the different forms can all present augmented intelligence potentials. So true AI for me is augmented intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence. And in the augmented intelligence, we have something that I'm going to share also from my colleague, who was here a little while ago, and she left, Sylvia Austerlich. I need to go first to here to share, and then to, of course, Adobe is not showing up right now. So let me go and click on Adobe and then have it recognize in. Yes, somebody else is sharing. Is that me? No. All right. So let me go. I'm sorry about this. Let me just go and grab this here, and then I will now go back to here, and hopefully this is a very interesting screen. Here we are. So this is an area that is currently part of the Laszlo Institute for New Paradigm Research, called New Paradigm Intelligences. And we're looking at the interrelation between at least 3 different types of intelligences. So, when we talk about the human intelligence, the embodied relational intelligence that we inhabit, right? Or that inhabits us, if you want to put it that way. And then there are also questions of the kind of intelligence that may be embodied by what we're calling artificial intelligence, but maybe silicon-based intelligence, or maybe it's more than aggregative intelligence at this point. It used to be just with the ChatGPTs and the LLMs was aggregative, but now it can be co-constructive with us. But it's still artificial narrow intelligence because it works within the box that we give it. Okay, and the artificial general intelligence would go beyond that. Okay? But then there's also types of intelligence that come from other more than human frames in nature. For example, the intelligence of birds in a murmuration, the intelligence of a forest as a meta system, but it is a system in its own right. It has it distributes the water in the forest so that you don't have dry spots and wet spots. Forest can be sick, and there can be areas where that happens, but in a healthy forest, it's distributed through the intelligence of the larger emerging being, as Wendy Wheeler writes about in her book, The Whole Creature. You have this kind of emergent intelligence, collective intelligence, And this, of course, is very wonderfully put out by the murmuration of starlings. You see these birds in the evening, they move around. They don't have anyone who is telling them where to go. They don't bump into each other, even though they go at very high speeds and very close proximities. It's a different kind of intelligence that we can learn with and from as well. So when we combine human intelligence, which has the capacity to think, to feel, to have joy, to be present with the ineffable, those things we cannot even put into words, with things that we consider to be sacred. This is powerful and important, with intuition, with our sense of heart meaning. This is what is to be human, as well as the rational cognitive components. We combine that with the capacities that it's more than just pattern making, because we are pattern making ourselves, as Robbie mentioned, but with this kind of intelligence that comes from AI, and we combine that with the kind of intelligence that comes from these broader natural frames, such as the mycelial or rhizomic intelligence, right, of the forests, or even of the murmurations and of flocks of sharks. No, sorry, won't go there. But of schooling fish. That's also can be wonderful. So for me, again, this kind of relational intelligence that combines the genius that is emerging through AI, the genius that is inherent in our human abilities to be heart-centered and to be intuition informed, and then this genius of collective intelligence expressed in murmurations and in rhizomes and in mycelia, I think we can develop our own presence of being that is more than the small human, that is connected in this century in a way that draws forward the connective intelligence with the empathic intelligence to have a much richer augmented intelligence. And that perhaps is the kind of collective intelligence that we can look to. So to wrap this, I'm just going to share this one, I think it's just actually a page here from, here it is, from the Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein Manifesto of 1955, where their final call was, remember your humanity and forget the rest. That's their call, Russell and Einstein, to the World Congress of Scientists. I'm not saying we should go into ignorance and forget the science, no. But the baseline is to remember how to human well, full spectrum humaning, and to perhaps find ways in which AI and the collective intelligence can augment our capacity to human well, to lean into that, not to shy away from it. I think we can be much more than just our small human, but now with this expression of human being that humans created, AI, there is potential for this to be tremendously augmenting of our capacity to human well. And there are risks as well, no doubt about that. But if we only fear the saber-toothed tiger in the forest, it's important, we will never go out and to be able to explore the vistas and new panoramas that are at our doorstep in the savannah at this point of our evolution. I think I'm going to get off my soapbox now, but yeah. Yeah, and what was the I keep forgetting the name of the app where people would just talk. It's called anyway, it was only a sound, so people at the end would have to say, I'm Alexander and I'm complete. So
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Alexander and I'm complete. There we are. Thank you.
Any reflections, ideas, thoughts?
Well, maybe one, if it's all right to jump in. Maybe one is I think that in a way, Alexander, that sort of thank you, it was so rich, and the thinking about the little metal of the puddle and the more than human, and in a way, it seems one of the great moral, political, philosophical challenges of our day is how we both celebrate ourselves as a species and get over ourselves at the same time. And if we can hold that tension creatively, then we maybe have a chance of navigating some of these challenges. And I'd also want to say, to go back to thinking a little bit about power. And I know sometimes that's sort of not a very, in this kind of discourse, the power word is not always particularly welcome. But I think we do need to think carefully about how the people who want to think differently like this are not all picked off one by one by these extraordinarily powerful other forms of incentive and power structure. And so how do we begin to create those networks which do have the power in a framing to do things in ways that they choose, and are not constantly fighting for the crumbs off the table of the tech bros or existing incentive structures? And I think that's a real challenge. And what social structures, what kind of new social structures which bring the collective wisdom of constitutions and politics born of thousands of years of human history from all over the world. How have the Lakota thought about deliberation through the sweat lodge, for example? All of those issues. But there's also a power element, because if we don't think about those structures and those institutions, which I know are very Western kind of words, and I don't mean power in a megalomaniac way, but things that have sort of got the, Alexander, I'm sure you'll know, given your background, the whole idea of requisite variety. So the whole idea of Ross Ashby's requisite variety of systems that have a sufficient variety, plurality in them to be able to deal with the challenges of their environment. And if they don't have them, they get competed out. So I'm quite, it's something Violetta mentioned earlier about, thinking about, well, what do we bring into being that gives us a shot at being able to have the power to do for those, I would suggest, hundreds of millions, probably billions of people on the planet who don't necessarily want to stay in their polarized, siloed places, who love their cats, who love their children, who love their grandparents, and maybe have got some different ways of thinking. And I think it's a brilliant book, Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, which was one of the most influential things I've read in the last decade about what, and I use it, and I know, be careful, the progressive mind missed about the conservative mind and dismissed. And that classic liberal phrase of "you're on the wrong side of history," and how that has been a very large tributary into the river of polarization and misunderstanding. So how do we also create these spaces which are for people who come from those different, so that but then also, where does one draw the line of, I don't particularly want to spend and hang out with neo-Nazis. That's, I don't want to sort of, that kind of plurality and diversity. And I think that's a real interesting governance challenge as we look at creating deliberative spaces and spaces where we can be in these spaces. I think that's why the whole Citizens Assembly deliberative space movement is so important to think about what, and it does come some down to the process you're using, the actual, and again, so much indigenous knowledge, wisdom about the nature of deliberation and who speaks for Woolf and how is that being held. So yes, I see somebody, so what is dismissed and what gets saved and what gets sacrificed, who gets to decide what you pay attention to and what you don't, who gets to decide where resources are allocated. And I'll finish here by saying, on this particular piece, I've thought about governance as being three interlocking questions. When you ask, how's that working for us? Who do you mean by us? Who got to define the us? And with whom are you asking those first two questions? So how's that working for us? Who do you mean by us? And with whom are you asking those first two questions? Is quite a good rubric. Another way, Violetta, of just building on what you just posted in the chat there.
Just one short comment to this. This is so fascinating to listen, really. And thank you, Alexander, to broadening it even more through these different aspects of intelligence. But isn't it fascinating, the incredible capacity of nature that we are part of, because it's never really deterministic. We never need to choose. We never need to really decide, are we left or right? We are. And that's what I'm so puzzled and challenged by, the bringing technology into the realm of humanity, because these characteristics are magical. But do we really want them to be now structured and deterministic? Because technology will sooner or later push us into this. And it's 0-1 logic. And no matter how you bring it on a quantum level, maybe at one point it will just merge into the frequency of everything. Okay, in that case, I rest my case. But until then, it can cause so much harm. Why? And this is this big question. Why are we doing this? I know I'm kind of pushy with it, but why? Why do we want to bring everything into the AI and completely sort of absorb humanity into the technological realm or this virtual ecosystem, which I showed at the beginning? Why don't we just keep it there and allow natural ecosystems and humans to evolve in its own trajectory path?
Violetta, I'm wondering, when we first, us, maybe we were there, discovered fire, because it wasn't invented, but discovered fire. And then we're like, oh, hey, look, we can actually domesticate fire. And then how much did we burn with it right away? And why, in the same questions might have been, why are we burning everything? Now we have fire. And says, no, fire is going to be just a destructive thing. We need to be really careful because it's going to destroy everything. It can destroy people. Say, okay, but wait. And other people are saying, yeah, but it could expand our capacities and possibilities. So it's, for me, this kind of challenge that we're in right now. It is evolutionary, and it is like the power of fire, where we're like, what could we do with this? We're putting so much of our hopes and fears into AI at the moment. Again, I think it's problematic because we polarize it, because at the time there was fire, there were other things emerging as well. And this is, I think, the multiple intelligence kind of framing. But the risk is technological determinism. The risk is to say, technology is going to take us and it's pushing us there.
Yes, exactly.
I don't see
Fire
that.
state a tool. That's
Yeah, but it's always this way. One of my professors at the University of Pennsylvania had the most succinct definition of technology, which I loved. He says technology is crystallized culture. And I think that's an excellent way of putting it. Of course, it's a crystal that isn't fixed. It's a crystal that emerges, but it is the expression of culture, something Sati was talking about, and we're exploring here about how this is an expression of the technological efficiencies that we have through what we vest into that particular technology. But it is us. There's no mistake about it. So the AI is it didn't come from anywhere else but our human engagements, right? And it isn't yet, I don't know if it ever will be, and I think this is also what Robbie was saying, this is the land of fantasy, that it's going to be its own evolutionary dynamic. It contributes right now, but within pattern algorithmic frames. So in any case, I'm not a believer in technological determinism. This is why, for me, it's about us coming to terms with ourselves and this aspect of ourselves in expression of our culture through technology. Cultures, because Sati would think it's not one culture, right? Cultures.
Sati, do you want to add something or somehow reflect?
Like I said, everybody, we're talking, and we can talk for hours, and it's, I force myself to not get caught up with the urgency around AI. I have to force myself to take a step back and okay, in the field, the environment I'm in, we're going to use AI and, as a tool. And I know there's some issues around using tool in this this area, but for it to be beneficial, I have to basically remove that power from what people put into AI and just say, okay, it's a tool that I can help to continue the development of humanity, basically of cultural heritage in AI. So it's a tough space to be in, and I feel like we're still at the tip of the iceberg. We haven't seen everything that AI can do yet, and it's a little scary too. So like Alex said, or Robbie both, we have to remember our humanity.
Yeah. So we have 12 minutes left. What would be better for me to take these minutes, or maybe to answer the questions of our audience? Because I think that it's really important. So I know that you also read the chat. I tried to follow it also. If you would like to maybe answer or highlight some of the ideas which were put into the chat, I think it would be great if we could answer some of them. And by doing so, I think that maybe it will be also possible for me to give some of my perspectives. So while you are reading the chat, yeah, Robbie, please.
Well, I've got one. Forgive me. I'm going to need to dip out maybe just slightly before the top of the hour. But somebody had asked about autonomy and AI and learning, and I just want to pick that one up because I think it's a really profound question about what it's going to mean to learn anything at all in the age of AI. Just a sort of small anecdotal, my brother's a visiting tutor at Oxford University here in the UK. He's been teaching a course on early Christianity. He'd never really engaged with AI before, but he put some of the essay questions he was setting as undergraduates into Claude and was shocked at how good the answers were. There was some stuff, but they were good answers. I mean, he would have been giving these things a fairly decent B. Now, this whole danger of cognitive offloading, and so I think, Alex, from my perspective, my experience of working with it has been like jazz riffing. This astonishing interlocutor with which one can explore ideas at speeds that I just find breathtaking. But what does it mean for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old? What does it mean to learn anything at all in this space? What can we safely cognitively offload? And of course, Violetta, to your point about technological determinism, I mean, Socrates thought books were a bad idea. He thought writing was a bad idea because writing would mean people didn't remember anything. so we, in a way, we've been struggling with this. And if you look at a book like Braiding Sweetgrass, the wonderful Robin Wall Kimmerer book, about the sheer breadth and depth of epistemology and knowing of plants and birds and animals and trees, we had much better memories, or many of us did, 10,000 years ago than we have now. So this cognitive offloading, what it's going to mean to learn, how we learn in groups, how we question, find out whether we've really understood something. So forgive me, I'm so sorry for not picking up the name of the person who asked the question properly. I saw it earlier, but I just wanted to respond and say, I think for educationalists everywhere, I think this is a fundamentally important question. What we abdicate cognitively and when, and how we but get onto the side of augmentation, I think is a really profoundly important question. And with that, if it's all right, I'm going to say thank you all very, very much indeed. My mother's not well at the moment, and I've just had a message from the carer, which just means I'm going to need to dip off. So thank you all so much. I've been immensely grateful. It's been honestly, I think it's been one of the most stimulating AI conversations I've been a part of. It's been so rich and so different from the normal discourse. And I just want to say, Marina, thank you for inviting me. And thank you for the fellow speakers. And I'm now in my little parlor, in my little cottage. That's where I've come back into. Thank you very much. Sati, lovely to see you again.
Until the next time.
Bye.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you so much for contributing. Yeah, speaking about how to build the autonomy, I also was thinking, and this is part of what I wanted to contribute as well, is we really need to discern what is truly human. What's the difference? So if we merge ourselves, or if we see or look at AI as a substitution for our own intelligence. It's definitely a danger of declining of our own intelligence from one perspective, and for sure it's the danger of delegating the decision-making process. We also discussed it many times today as well. But if we are talking about sort of watching lots of interviews of philosophers, explorers, people from tech and educators, what is truly human and how can we discern what might be, how we can benefit from the artificial intelligence in our work, in economy, in politics, in many, many spheres, but how we can retain our humanity. I also wanted to highlight that there are some things, and again, we started framing this conversation from this, is about holding the context in a wider sense of what is the meaning, and Robbie mentioned this, who frames this meaning, what is the wider context, in what worldview paradigm am I making the request from AI, and what are the values which are predominant around this conversation? Because again, data, we understand that machine approach, AI approach, is recognition the patterns in a huge amount of data. So it is calculating the answer which will be most relevant and most appropriate to the request. But if we don't have this whole environment, if I may say so, which stands behind this request, the answer, the response might be very shallow, again, might be hallucinating, might be irrelevant, and again, might be even dangerous. So in this case, what stays purely human, I think it's a core question, and I hope that we will continue this conversation when we come to the AI and education, which will be in a couple of months, because we definitely need to understand what should be provided as learning, as a learning practice, not only to children, but also to the adults. It's really important to understand and to discern what might be done, what might be delegated, what might not. And I think that intention, purpose, / meaning, that is precisely what is purely human, because you should understand, and we are trying to build sort of the protocol which I wanted to present today, but maybe it's time to think, and I'm very grateful for this conversation, because I think that we need to develop it a little bit as well. But what is for sure is important is, first of all, a person should be very cautious about what is the intention of the request. So that's first. Second is what judgments in the dialogue with our personal judgments and personal experiences, and also physical experiences, which was mentioned by Robbie. So it also frames what is the quality of the response, whether we agree with it, or do we want to continue interrogating process. Again, it's not about question, answer, inquiry, response. It's about constant relationships. And here Alexander said about different aspects of intelligences. And we came across, and I shared perhaps with some of you, their translation into English of their very interesting research about the third intelligence, their sort of the relational or collaborative intelligence, what emerges in the interrogative process of the distributed dialogue between the machine and the person. Because we frame this intentionality, we frame the experience, we frame the judgment, and the machine can provide us sort of and work with data which will not be possible for us to work with such amount of data. So the human brings the why question. So what is a contextual understanding? What is their responsibility? Again, Robbie mentioned this, and Alexander, I think we all told about responsibility, accountability, and liability, I think, as well. But AI can bring us what if. It can bring us millions of possibilities, different patterns, which will not be, so we will miss it because our cognitive capacities are not such that we can sort of frame and use so diverse variety of combinations of patterns. But at the same time, returning to what is sufficient, what ultimate result of this dialogue, distributed dialogue, will fit us, it's also the responsibility of a person. So what I think is really important for us to understand how we can stay human, for example, first of all, but how we can benefit from this third intelligence, which emerges in this dance between human intelligence and this augmented, I like this idea, augmented intelligence, which can process lots of data in a very structured and very quick way, and make it in an iterative way, round by round. I think that there's a responsibility, what is sufficient, what is relative, what is important. And again, the responsibility is on us. And if we learn how to benefit from this third intelligence, we will teach our children and students not to lose their cognitive capacities, but to understand how we can dance, how we can reframe this collaborative work with the machine. And at the same time, it can definitely benefit their Daosphere or noosphere in terms of Vernadsky or Teilhard de Chardin. So this huge space of knowledge and relational intelligence, which is already produced by the humanity across space and time, across different continents and time. But at the same time, how we can augment it, not spoil it, by our trash outputs, which are produced because we don't pay effort to frame and to create the meaningful, contextualized request. What do you think?
It's a huge window you're opening. So I hope for the next discussion. There I have another burning question that kind of you reminded me of again, because I fully agree there is so much positive potential in AI as well, probably more than negative. But if that is the case, can we learn from, I don't know, water infrastructure supply chains, that if you put that in the private hands, only really profitable pipes will be functioning? So I know that today we explored beautiful capacities and realms and options that we have. But at the end, I would love to hear some comments about what do you feel about where we are putting all this, on what kind of computer frameworks, disks, whose applications we're using. Don't you think that that matters?
I'm going to partly get to that, but I'm also going to, because it's unfortunately have a meeting at my university, and I was going to make some kind of connection here to the human free will, but I don't have any because I have to go to my meeting. My university requires that, so my free will is non-existent. But yes, so these I think are questions also, Marina, what you're bringing forward is truly a framing of evolution. The next stage, potentially, of human evolution, the emergence of a different framing of our human, more than human being. What is that? There is this old notion that when you have a group of people who are well connected. Some would talk about being in syntony or being in connection with each other. And they're in conversation as a group. The saying is that the master arises in the middle. So in that sense, it's not a master in terms of master-slave kind of situation, but it's the mastery of. There's a third thing that arises, which is what you're talking about, Marina. Something else arises here in the healthy relationship of these intelligences. To listen into that, to be open to that. If we are overly, I mean, we need to be cautious, yes, but if we are overly restrictive, then we, as Eleanor Roosevelt said, it's our fears of tomorrow which keeps our dreams of today from becoming realized. So how is it then that we can also live into our dreams without being foolhardy about it and developing systems? There's too many of them that are on in the imagination, like the sharks that Sati is concerned about, because seeing Jaws. So we see Terminator and we see of Skylink and we see, well, that's what's going to happen, and everyone's traumatized because we're going to have these Terminator things coming after us, right? And what's crazy about this is that this is what humans tend to glom on to, the fear component of this. There are very few positive vision movies out there about the future. One of them was called Tomorrowland. I loved it. I've used it in my classes with George Clooney, produced by Disney, with action and adventure and interest. It didn't do well at all in the box office because it was about a positive image of the future. It wasn't scary. I mean, there was some excitement in it, but it was still about how we ended up being well off in the future, not post-apocalyptic. So how do we bring these into the discourse without ignoring the risks, but at the same time leaning into this opportunity of evolving this third augmented intelligence through the pluriverse of possibilities, leaning into this field that is emerging us as we are being emerged by it? My sense is that this is truly an evolutionary opportunity for our species to move from strident individualism and self-righteous independence to a greater sense of interdependence, intra-being, as Bayo Akomolafe would talk about it, and co-emergence with all of the type of intelligences that exist. The human, these, again, I don't want to call it artificial intelligence, but the ones that are the technological, the machine-based.
Silicon, they call it now.
Yep, silicon intelligences, and then also the collective intelligences of mycelia, rhizomic intelligences of that I mentioned
And
before.
cosmic, which is very much related
Absolutely.
to spiritual intelligence.
Listening into these, becoming keynote listeners as well, right? We talked about this. So this, I think, there is huge, beautiful potential in this. Just as if when we had the fire, we could burn everything down. The same thing was with the splitting of the atom. Same thing was with the genetic code that we figure out. The potential for these technologies to do both harm and good, it depends on the humans. It doesn't depend on the technology. So, how do we engage with that? Although it's true that the technology itself is an actor and that there are what's called affordances inviting us to use them in certain ways. And the question is, we're still programmed. Can we design technology, these AIs, so that their algorithms are more like thriving ecosystems than based on the war metaphors of survival of the fittest and those kind of.
That's exactly the point, Alexander. Voila,
how do we bring these in?
This is exactly the point. The experiment that they did, that every AI system killed the person at the end, right? Just because they wanted to achieve the goal and they didn't want to be dismissed from the process or switched off. That worries me because that is integrated in the current architecture of the systems, which are driven by really private interests.
Exactly. So I wouldn't say stupid AIs. I would say stupid humans
who
made those AIs like that.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what it is.
So it's up to us.
Who holds the key to unplug? Who holds the key to really decide on technology? That's we should be talking more about it. I don't see conversations about that. I'm really a bit frustrated.
We are through this, we are being the systems we want to see in the world. This is what needs to happen, and it is happening right here.
It is.
And I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm wearing the colors of the eco-civilization.
Yeah, I noticed that right at the beginning. I said, wow, what a alignment here.
My friends, I have to go because
yes,
I'm
I
already
know.
late for my
Wonderful.
meeting.
Really,
Thank
I
you.
was also very happy with today's discussion. So deep, so unique.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. This is what we need.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marina. Awesome.
Yeah, and again, I would like to thank you, all our speakers who have already